Did we? I don't think we got that many reactions to that.
I did.
Whole limit.
I did. I actually wrote the part of the track that you're referring to, and I got into a lot of trouble. It was actually part of a piece that I'd written for XXX Fruit, which was a literary arts quarterly that we started with, and Christine Tedeschi. And it was about the question of the rise of the religious right, and with that, that tide came religious symbols. So I was sort of thinking a lot about it, and I transposed some of that into this piece. And Tony Kushner has never spoken to me since then because of the angels thing, and he thought I was talking specifically about him. I thought the play was brilliant, so I wasn't. I wasn't really. I was talking more generally about the ways in which we are allowed to engage with death and the role of the artist in helping us unravel the specifics of it. He was just one.
When you use the word AIDS and angels in the same paragraph.
Wait, it's not that simple.
It is referencing.
It's not that simple, because actually the piece came about because we conceived of this issue as an exquisite corpse. And it was really, the issue was about the O.J. Simpson trial, and we took the judge's instructions to the jury and broke it into sentences and gave each sentence or group of sentences to a different artist to construct a piece around it. And I was actually writing about the fact that Nicole Simpson's sister wore an angel pin on her lapel during the trial, and it was ruled out as agitprop by the judge because it intoned a sympathy for the dead. And she wore it, and then the next day the council wore it, so it was ruled out as agitprop. So that actually is what I was writing about it.
Wow. It's okay if you were criticizing. I would take up those two pieces. I'm still struck when I read Good Luck, Miss You, by the kind of lucidity of it and the ferocity of it. I think it's an amazing. I think it's an amazing text. I think that those pieces are both really important in terms of capturing, and many people in this room who lived through that period of time will remember very vividly the despair of the mid-90s, which has become all but forgotten, basically, in the time that we're living in, and what it meant to. I mean, I can just speak specifically on the last day of Mark Simpson's life, where he took his life because the AIDS medication he had tried didn't really work for him. His health was really so far gone. And literally that morning was the Sunday morning when he died. And Andrew Sullivan had published a coverage story in the New York Times that was basically saying that AIDS was over. Literally, it was an article saying AIDS was over. And I thought, well, that's interesting, Mark's not for Mark. And I think that the kind of what gets slightly blurred now is the 1-2 punch of the kind of very plain-spoken despair in the poster, and the kind of very considered rage and guarded optimism in that longer polemical text that really capture the period of time and hinted a way forward. But more than anything, when I read about them, it's just electrifying to think about how, and no wonder how full of despair we were, and no wonder we were that full of despair, because there was such a kind of almost without pause, maybe 8 or 9 year period of time for most of us where people were dying left and right, and things were seemed really, really bleak. So I think that's what stands out now. And when you look at the and then when Douglas interviewed us, and Douglas Crimp interviewed us in Art Forum in 2004 or 6, whatever year it was, he kind of really zoned in on that moment, and he has written himself quite a bit about that kind of broken down moment of the mid-90s, which I think is important for us to remember in a period of time where people who have HIV don't seem sick anymore, and the idea, it's such a kind of emotional grounding to everything that happened from that period of time, and that I can speak personally, and probably speak for the rest of us, to say for most of us it took years, maybe a decade actually, to be even sort of okay about some of these issues again. There's a reason why Graham Perry couldn't have had done this work, I think, sooner, because a certain amount of time had to pass. And weirdly, we did it before Occupy Wall Street was happening. happening, which is the weirdest part about this thing, is we finished the show and that thing was happening, and we were like, oh my God, what is going on in the world?
I just wanted to say one other thing about the relationship of those two texts. The polemic piece, which I have to say when I saw it, because it exists on a broadsheet, very sort of Thomas Paine style. But when I saw it laid out in the catalog, I was like, oh my God, it goes on forever. But it was still filled with fury, and it was still filled with resentment, and it was still filled with a sense of incompletion. But it was at a point where Grand Fury realized, because of the contextual change of the world around us, we could not go forward with the same strategies we had been using. It was our swan song. It was our goodbye. And so in a sense, I find the 4 questions, which was a piece that was done by a portion of Grand Fury. Not every person was involved in that piece. I personally was not involved in that piece. To me, this very long ranting, well, it's not really ranting, but very long strident text was the end. It was like, it's put to bed, it's done, we have to go forward. So to see the 4 questions arise, it was really like some kind of desperate phoenix arising from like the ashes. It was so emotional. It was I don't know, it's a weird kind of life after death that was all wrapped up with Mark. I'm sorry.
It was a very emotional moment. I think as we're juxtaposing the two, I think something that's interesting to see is that one is incredibly reductive. It actually uses the original strategy of bullet points and a hostile intervention, but it does it in a very, has a quietude about it that was very purposeful, and the idea of it being a white space to sort of carve its own zone out of the noise, and that the text was so tiny so that you were really forced into this dialogue in a way that was antithetical to our other work, but it used the same strategy, but we knew we had to talk about things that were deeply personal because that's what was happening. It was a really long time that we were now I'm gonna cry, that we were fighting this battle, and but then I think that juxtaposed against the other piece, which is all about words. We were struggling within the collective to deal with the fact that being reductive was not really effective anymore, that you really needed to say a lot in order to say anything. So between those two pieces, you can see the tension between those two strategies. And in fact, one of the pieces that began to derail us in my memory was we had this idea that we wanted to do a safe-sex comic, like the kind that other community-based organizations in New York were doing. And we realized we couldn't begin to say everything we needed to say in a little pamphlet, and that there were other people.
We weren't very funny.
And it wasn't funny, and it didn't suit us. But I think that we did find the shrill version of it in that long text piece. But I think it's very interesting to look at those two works in hindsight. And I should also say that at the time I felt like, not with a bang, but with a whimper, I felt like no one saw the 4 questions, and I was actually shocked when Douglas asked us about it. I didn't think that it had resonated with anyone. We had no response, there was no community outrage.
Yeah, but that's because the response was a contemplative response. It
Yeah.
wasn't about